This marriage was a mistake. Ethan Carter's voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that never shook even when everything else did. And yet the way his fingers lingered on the simple silver ring told a different story, like he wasn't ready to let go of something he had never meant to keep. The room around him was quiet, too large, too perfect, the kind of penthouse that looked like it belonged in a magazine, but never felt like a home. And for a brief second, he just stood there, staring at his own reflection in the glass wall as the city lights flickered below like distant stars, before everything blurred back into the past, back to the moment it all began, back to the day he made the most calculated decision of his life. It had been raining that afternoon, a soft, steady rain that made the world feel slower, quieter, almost unreal. And Ethan had walked into that small cafe on the corner because it was the only place within 2 blocks that didn't recognize him, didn't whisper his name, didn't treat him like something untouchable. And that was where he saw her, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee she barely drank, her fingers wrapped around the warmth like it was the only thing grounding her. Lily Brooks didn't look like someone who belonged in his world. Her dress was simple, her shoes slightly worn, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders as she watched the rain with a kind of quiet attention that made everything else fade. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan stopped walking. He didn't believe in fate, didn't believe in chance, but he did believe in solutions, and right now, he needed one. Because in less than a week, his family would announce his engagement to a woman he didn't choose, a woman who came with contracts, expectations, and a future that felt like a cage disguised as success. So he walked over, sat down across from Lily without asking, and said the words that would change both their lives. "Marry me." Just like that. No build-up, no emotion. Just a clean, precise offer like everything else in his world. And she looked up at him, not startled, not confused, just calm, her eyes meeting his in a way that felt almost unsettling, like she saw more than she should. "It wouldn't be real," he added, his tone even, "just on paper. A year, maybe less. You'd be compensated. Generously." He expected hesitation, questions, maybe even fear, but Lily only tilted her head slightly, studying him as if weighing something deeper than his words. And then she asked softly, "And when it ends?" Ethan didn't pause, didn't let himself think too far ahead. "It ends clean." For a moment, the rain seemed louder, filling the silence between them, and then she nodded, just once, simple and certain. "Okay." It was too easy, that was his first thought, too smooth, too perfect, but he ignored it, because this was what he needed, a solution without complications, a wife who wouldn't interfere, wouldn't demand, wouldn't stay. And as he slid the small velvet box across the table, revealing the plain silver ring inside, he told himself this was just a transaction, nothing more, nothing real. And yet when Lily picked up the ring, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest second, something in his chest shifted, subtle but undeniable, like a quiet warning he chose not to hear. Because if he had looked closer, if he had really seen the way her eyes softened for just a fraction of a second, he might have realized the truth much sooner, that the girl he thought was the safest choice was the one who would change everything. The first night in the penthouse felt too quiet, like the walls were waiting for something that never came, and Lily stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the endless stretch of lights below, her reflection faint against the glass, as if she did not fully belong inside this world yet. Everything around her was polished, precise, untouched, from the marble floors that echoed softly under each step to the perfectly arranged furniture that looked more like display than comfort. And for a moment she simply stood there, her fingers lightly brushing the silver ring on her hand as though testing its weight, not because it was heavy, but because of what it meant. Behind her, Ethan placed his keys down with the same controlled movement he used for everything else, his presence, filling the room without sound. And even without turning, Lily could feel the distance between them, not just physical, but something deeper, something carefully maintained. "Your room is down the hall," he said, his voice steady, almost detached, like he was giving directions to a guest instead of speaking to his wife. And she nodded, though he could not see it, before finally turning to face him, her expression calm, unreadable in a way that made him pause for half a second longer than he intended. Most people filled silence with questions when they stepped into his life. They asked about rules, expectations, boundaries. But Lily did not ask anything. She simply observed, as if she was already adjusting without needing instructions. The next morning came with soft light filtering through the tall windows, and Ethan was already awake, sitting at the kitchen counter with his coffee untouched, scanning emails on his phone, when he noticed something that did not fit his routine. A second cup placed quietly across from him, still warm, the steam rising in thin, steady lines. And when he looked up, Lily was standing a few feet away, not waiting for acknowledgement, not seeking approval, just there. "You did not drink it yesterday," she said gently, not as a question, but as a simple observation, and something about that made him narrow his eyes slightly, because she was right, and she should not have noticed. He set his phone down slowly, studying her now with more attention, the way she moved through the kitchen without hesitation, the way she reached for things as if she already knew where they were, even though she had only been here for one night. And when she adjusted the blinds slightly to let in just enough light without glare, it felt less like guesswork and more like instinct. "You seem comfortable," he said, testing the words, watching for a reaction. But Lily only gave a small shrug, her fingers brushing against the counter as she turned back toward him. "Comfort is something you create," she replied softly. And for a moment, Ethan did not respond, because there was something about the way she said it, not defensive, not proud, just certain, that did not match the image he had built of her. Later that day, as they stepped into a formal lunch with business associates who had not yet realized the marriage was real, Ethan expected Lily to stay quiet, to blend into the background the way someone in her position usually would. But instead, she did something small that shifted everything. When one of the men made a subtle remark about market instability, Lily tilted her head slightly and said, in the same calm tone, "It is not instability, it is transition. The difference is whether you are prepared for it." And the table went still, not because of what she said, but because of how precisely she said it. And Ethan felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest, not anger, not confusion, but curiosity, sharp and unexpected, because the girl he thought would stay invisible was starting to see everything. By the third day, Ethan Carter realized something was off, not in a way he could immediately define, but in the quiet details that refused to align with the version of Lily Brooks he thought he had chosen, because she did not ask for anything, did not hesitate, and more importantly, did not make mistakes in a world that was designed to expose them. It started with small things, almost invisible unless someone like him was watching closely, the way she greeted the house staff by name after hearing it only once, the way she adjusted her posture automatically when stepping into formal spaces, the way she never overdressed yet never looked out of place, like she understood balance without effort. And Ethan was not a man who believed in coincidence. That afternoon, he stood at the edge of his private office, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass, while Lily sat quietly on the couch behind him, flipping through a book she had picked from his shelf, not out of curiosity, but with a kind of familiarity that made him turn slightly, his gaze lingering longer than usual. "That book is not exactly light reading," he said, watching for hesitation, but she only traced the edge of the page with her finger and replied softly, "It depends on what you are used to." And something in the way she said it made the air feel different, like there was a layer he had not uncovered yet. Later that evening, a formal dinner was arranged, one that mattered more than most: investors, partners, people who measured everything in subtle signals. And Ethan had expected Lily to remain silent, to follow his lead, to exist beside him without influence. But instead, she moved through the room with quiet precision, not drawing attention, yet somehow shifting it. And when one of the senior partners tested her with a question, disguised as casual conversation, she answered without pause, her tone calm, her words exact. "Sometimes the strongest position is the one no one sees you building." And Ethan felt it then, not just curiosity, but a fracture in his certainty, because that was not something a girl with her background should say, not with that level of clarity, not without thinking. He watched her more closely after that, every movement, every glance, every silence, and the more he observed, the more something inside him tightened, not out of suspicion alone, but out of something deeper, something closer to being unsettled, because Lily was not trying to impress anyone. She was not trying to prove anything. She simply existed in a way that felt deliberate. That night, as the city quieted and the lights dimmed into a softer glow, Ethan found himself standing in the hallway outside her room, not sure why he had stopped there. His hand hovering for a second before he knocked lightly, and when she opened the door, her expression unchanged, calm, almost as if she had expected him. He did not step inside. He just looked at her, searching for something he could not name. "Who are you, really?" he asked, his voice lower than before, stripped of its usual certainty. And for the first time, Lily did not answer right away, her eyes holding his, steady and unreadable, before she said quietly, "Does it matter?" And the question lingered between them, heavier than any answer, because for the first time in a long time, Ethan Carter did not have control over what came next. The question did not leave the air even after Ethan stepped back, because Lily did not answer it, and somehow that silence stayed with him, longer than any explanation could have, following him into the next morning where everything looked the same but did not feel the same anymore. He noticed it in the way he paused before checking his phone, in the way his eyes drifted toward the empty chair across from him before she entered the kitchen quietly, already aware of the rhythm he had not realized she had learned, placing a fresh cup of coffee in front of him without a word. And this time, he drank it. Lily did not ask why, did not react. She simply stood there for a second longer than necessary before turning away, and it was that small moment, that almost invisible pause, that made something shift inside him, subtle but undeniable, like a door opening just slightly. Later that day, Ethan canceled a meeting for the first time in months, not because he had to, but because something felt off, a quiet restlessness he could not explain, and instead of leaving, he stayed in the penthouse, watching as Lily moved through the space, not like a guest, not like someone temporary, but like someone who understood how to bring life into something that had always been still. She adjusted the lighting in the living room as the afternoon softened, opened the windows just enough to let in a light breeze, and placed a small vase with simple white flowers on the table. Nothing expensive, nothing extravagant, but somehow the room felt different, warmer, like it was finally being lived in. "You changed things," Ethan said from across the room, his voice quieter than usual, and Lily glanced at him briefly before returning her attention to the flowers. "Only a little," she replied. But he knew it was more than that, because for the first time, the space did not feel like something he owned. It felt like something he could stay in. That evening, the city was wrapped in a soft rain again, the kind that blurred the lights into something almost dreamlike. And Ethan found himself standing by the window, not working, not thinking about numbers or deals, just there. And when Lily stepped beside him, close but not touching, he did not move away. They stood in silence, the kind that did not feel empty, and after a while he spoke. Without looking at her, "You do not act like someone who needs this," his words slow, measured, but lacking their usual edge, and Lily took a quiet breath before answering. "Maybe I do not need it," she said softly. "But that does not mean I should not be here." And that answer stayed with him, settling deeper than he expected, because it was not about money, not about status, it was about choice. Something he had built his life around, but somehow lost along the way. A few moments later, as the rain tapped gently against the glass, Lily reached up and adjusted the curtain slightly, her hand brushing near his for just a second, and neither of them pulled away immediately, not because it meant something obvious, but because it did not need to. The closeness was enough, the quiet presence was enough, and for the first time, Ethan did not feel the need to define it, to control it, or to push it away. Instead, he let it stay, just like that, fragile and unspoken, and somewhere in that stillness, without realizing it, Ethan Carter began to wait, not for an answer, not for a truth, but for her, in a way he had never waited for anyone before. The invitation arrived the next morning, printed on thick ivory paper with a name Ethan had not seen in weeks, but had not forgotten either. And the moment he read it, the quiet rhythm he had begun to settle into shifted again, sharper this time, more familiar, like a past he had carefully placed behind him was stepping forward without asking. Lily noticed the change before he said anything, not because of what he did, but because of what he stopped doing, the way his hand paused mid-motion, the way his gaze hardened just slightly, and she did not ask, She simply waited, giving him the kind of space that did not feel like distance. "We have an event tonight," he said finally, his tone returning to that controlled edge, but there was something underneath it now, something tighter, and Lily nodded once, setting her cup down with quiet precision. "What kind of event?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. And Ethan hesitated for the briefest second before answering. "The kind where people watch everything." And that was all he gave. But it was enough. The venue was larger than anything Lily had stepped into since entering his world. A grand hall filled with soft golden light and conversations that never fully revealed themselves. And the moment they walked in together, the attention shifted, subtle but immediate. Eyes turning, whispers beginning, not because of her, but because of him, and the unexpected presence beside him. Lily could feel it, the weight of being measured without a single word spoken, but she did not shrink, did not falter. She simply stayed beside him, matching his pace, her presence quiet but grounded. And then it happened, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of precision that made it impossible to ignore. A woman stepped into their path, elegant, composed, her gaze fixed entirely on Ethan as if Lily did not exist at all. "You did not tell me you were bringing someone," she said, her voice smooth but edged with something colder beneath. And for the first time that evening, Ethan's posture shifted, not away, but slightly forward, like he was bracing for impact. "This is my wife," he said, the words clear, deliberate. And for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, because the statement was not just information, it was a line drawn. The woman's eyes flickered toward Lily then, slowly, assessing, dismissive in a way that was almost effortless. "I see," she replied, though it was clear she did not accept it, not fully, not yet, and her gaze lingered just long enough to make the tension visible before she turned her attention back to Ethan, speaking to him as if they were still standing in the same place they had always been. Lily did not interrupt, did not react, but she did notice everything. The way Ethan's voice remained controlled but slightly lower, the way his hand rested closer to hers than before, not touching, but near enough to feel. And after a moment, she stepped forward just slightly, not to confront, but to exist in the space that had tried to exclude her. "It is a beautiful event," she said calmly, her tone gentle but perfectly placed, and it was not what she said, but how she said it, that shifted something, because it was not uncertain, not hesitant. It belonged. The woman's attention returned to her, this time with a sharper edge, but Lily did not look away, her gaze steady, her presence quiet but unmovable. And for a brief second, the balance changed, not in a way anyone announced, but in a way everyone felt. Later, as the evening continued and the distance between past and present grew thinner, Ethan found himself watching Lily more than the room, more than the people he was supposed to engage, because she was not reacting the way he expected. She was not overwhelmed, not intimidated. She was navigating it, understanding it, and the realization settled in slowly, heavier than before, that the woman he had chosen to avoid complications might be the one thing in his life he could no longer predict. The drive back was quieter than usual, not tense, not distant, but filled with something unspoken that neither of them seemed ready to name. And Ethan kept his eyes on the road while the city lights passed in long blurred lines, his thoughts not on the event they had just left, but on the way Lily had stood there, calm and unshaken in a room designed to test her. And it did not make sense, not with the version of her he had chosen, not with the story he had accepted. Beside him, Lily sat with her hands resting lightly in her lap, her posture relaxed, her gaze soft as she looked out the window, and for a moment, it felt like the night had settled into something gentle again, until they stopped at a red light, and a reflection caught his attention, not hers, but the faint glint of something inside her bag, something structured, deliberate, and unfamiliar. He did not say anything then, but the image stayed with him, quiet but persistent, like a question waiting for the right moment. The next morning came earlier than expected, with Ethan already awake before sunrise, standing in his office with a file open in front of him, not because he needed it, but because he had asked for it. And as the pages turned slowly under his fingers, the silence in the room grew heavier, because the information did not match the life Lily had shown him, not even close. There were records, connections, traces of a background that was carefully hidden but impossible to erase completely. And while nothing was explicit, nothing confirmed, everything pointed in one direction. She was not who she said she was. Later that day, he found her in the living room, sitting near the window with the same quiet stillness she always carried, a book resting open in her hands. And for a moment, he just stood there, watching her, as if trying to reconcile the person in front of him with the fragments of truth he had uncovered. And when she looked up, meeting his gaze without hesitation, he stepped forward slowly, placing the file on the table between them without a word. Lily's eyes dropped to it briefly, not startled, not defensive, just aware, and that alone made something inside him tighten. "You should explain this," he said, his voice controlled, but lower now, stripped of the distance he usually relied on, and for a few seconds, she did not move, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the page before she closed the book with a soft sound, setting it aside as if she had always known this moment would come. "It depends," she said quietly, her eyes lifting back to his, steady and clear. "On what you think you found." And that answer did not ease anything. It only deepened the tension, because she was not denying it, not even trying to. Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair in a rare break of composure before meeting her gaze again. "You are not just someone who needed a way out," he said. More statement than question, and Lily held his eyes for a long moment, her expression soft but unreadable, before she replied, "No." And the word landed heavier than anything else she could have said. The room felt different after that, the space between them no longer quiet, but charged with something sharper, something closer to truth. And yet, even now, she was not explaining, not offering more than what he pulled from her. And that was what unsettled him the most. Not the lie itself, but the calm way she carried it, as if it had always been part of her, as if it did not change anything at all. "Then why me?" he asked finally, the question slipping out before he could stop it. And for the first time, Lily hesitated, not visibly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for him to feel it, a slight shift in her breath, a quiet pause before she answered. "Because you asked." And the simplicity of it should have felt empty, but it did not. It felt incomplete, like a truth that had not fully revealed itself yet. And as Ethan stood there, looking at the woman he thought he understood, he realized something with a clarity he could not ignore anymore. This was no longer a controlled arrangement, no longer a simple solution. This was something else entirely, something he had stepped into without seeing the full shape of it. And now, for the first time, he was not sure how to step back. The silence after her answer did not fade. It expanded, stretching across the room until it felt impossible to ignore, and Ethan stood there longer than he intended, his gaze fixed on Lily as if he could force the truth out of her just by refusing to look away. But she did not break, did not look down, did not offer anything more than what she had already given. And that was what made it worse, because it meant she was choosing this distance, choosing to let him stand there with questions she could easily answer. "That is not enough," he said finally, his voice sharper now, not raised, but edged in a way it had not been before, and Lily tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words rather than reacting to them. "It was enough for you when you asked," she replied quietly, and the calmness in her tone struck deeper than any argument could have. Ethan let out a slow breath, turning away for a moment as he tried to regain control, but it was slipping, not completely, not visibly, but enough for him to feel it, enough to make him step closer again, closing the distance that had always felt intentional until now. "I asked for something simple," he said, his eyes locking onto hers again. "Not this." And for the first time, there was something in his voice that was not just control, something closer to frustration, maybe even something he did not want to name. Lily stood up then, slowly, placing the book aside with care before facing him fully, and even now her movements were steady, measured, as if she had already accepted the direction this moment was going. "You asked for a solution," she said softly, "and I gave you one." And the words were not wrong, but they were not complete, and they both knew it. The air between them shifted again, heavier, closer, and for a brief second, neither of them spoke, the silence filled only by the faint sound of the city beyond the glass. Until Ethan broke it, his voice lower now, more personal than before. "Were any of it real?" And that question landed differently. Not like an accusation, but like something he had not meant to reveal, something that had slipped through the cracks of his control. Lily's eyes softened, just slightly, not enough to erase the distance, but enough to make it visible, and she took a small step back, not to retreat, but to create space where there was suddenly too much closeness. "What do you think?" she asked. And the answer should have been simple. It should have been clear, but it was not, because the moments they had shared did not feel false. They had never felt calculated, and that was what made everything harder to define. Ethan ran a hand through his hair again, the gesture more restless this time, and he shook his head once, as if rejecting the confusion that was building. "This was not supposed to matter," he said, almost to himself, but Lily heard it, and something in her expression changed, not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice, but enough for him to feel it, a quiet shift that carried more weight than words. "Then maybe that is the problem," she said gently, and there was no accusation in her voice, no anger, just a simple truth that settled between them with unexpected force. For a long moment, neither of them moved, the distance between them no longer physical, but something deeper, something that had formed without permission. And as Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, not as a solution, not as a role, but as the person standing in front of him, he realized something he could not ignore anymore. He was no longer trying to figure out who she was. He was trying to understand why losing her, even temporarily, suddenly felt like something he was not prepared for. And that realization, quiet and unspoken, marked the point where everything began to break. The distance between them did not close after that. It settled, quiet but final in a way that neither of them tried to undo. And the next morning came with a stillness that felt unfamiliar, like something had already ended even though nothing had been said out loud. Ethan woke earlier than usual, the penthouse colder than he remembered, or maybe it only felt that way because something was missing. And when he stepped into the living room, he knew immediately what it was. Lily was gone. It was not dramatic. There were no signs of urgency, no trace of chaos, just absence, clean and deliberate, as if she had removed herself from his world the same way she had entered it, quietly, without asking for anything in return. On the table near the window, there was only one thing left behind, the silver ring, resting exactly where the morning light touched it, simple, untouched, and for a long moment, Ethan just stood there, staring at it as if it did not make sense, as if it should not be there without her. He picked it up slowly, the metal cool against his fingers, and something in his chest tightened in a way he had not felt before, not sharp, not sudden, but deep, like a realization settling in too late. The silence stretched around him, heavier now, no longer peaceful, and for the first time since all of this began, he did not reach for his phone, did not open a file, did not move forward with the day as planned. He just stood there, holding something that had never meant anything until it suddenly did. Hours passed without him noticing, until the sound of a notification broke through the stillness, a message waiting, not from her, but about her, and he hesitated before opening it, as if part of him already knew that whatever he was about to see would change everything. The screen lit up with information he had not found before, not because it was hidden, but because he had not been looking in the right place. And as he read, the pieces came together in a way that made the past few weeks shift into something entirely different. Lily Brooks was not just someone with a quiet background. She belonged to a name that carried weight, a family known for influence, for legacy, for decisions that shaped more than just their own future. And more than that, there was a connection, one that tied her directly to his own world, one that traced back years, to choices made long before he ever met her. His grip tightened slightly around the phone as the realization settled in, not as a shock, but as something heavier, something that explained more than it solved, because this had never been random, never been simple, and the girl he thought had stepped into his life by chance had been standing much closer to it all along. He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face as the quiet returned, but it was different now, filled with meaning he could not ignore, and as his gaze drifted back to the ring in his hand, something became clear in a way that left no room for doubt. She had not just left, she had chosen to leave before he could push her away, before he could reduce everything they had to something transactional again. And that choice, more than anything else, was what stayed with him, Because for the first time, Ethan Carter understood that this was not about losing control. It was about losing something real, something he had not recognized until it was already gone. It took Ethan less than 24 hours to understand that waiting was no longer an option, because the silence she left behind did not fade. It grew, filling every space she had once quietly touched, from the soft shift of light in the living room to the untouched cup of coffee that no longer appeared across from him. And for the first time in years, he stepped away from everything that defined him. Meetings canceled, calls ignored, expectations set aside, because none of it felt urgent anymore, not compared to the weight of something he had failed to hold on to. The address was not difficult to find once he knew where to look, but standing in front of it felt different, not like arriving at a place he owned, but like stepping into something he did not control. And as he walked through the gates of a quiet estate far removed from the noise of the city, the truth settled fully into place. This was her world, not the one she had shown him, but the one she had chosen to leave behind. Lily was standing near the garden when he saw her, the afternoon light soft against the stillness around her, and for a moment, he did not call her name. He just watched, as if needing to confirm that she was real outside of everything they had shared. And when she finally turned, her expression did not change, not surprised, not distant, just calm in the same way it had always been. And yet something between them was undeniably different. "You found me," she said quietly, and Ethan let out a slow breath, stepping closer but not too close. "Not yet. I should have sooner," he replied, and there was no edge in his voice this time. No control, just something honest and unguarded that had never been there before. For a few seconds, neither of them moved, the distance holding, until he reached into his pocket and brought out the ring, the same simple piece that had once meant nothing, now resting in his palm like something far heavier. "You left this," he said, his voice softer now, and Lily's gaze dropped to it briefly before lifting back to his, steady but no longer unreadable. "It was never meant to be mine," she answered, and that might have been true before, but it was not true now. Ethan shook his head slightly, taking another step forward, closing the space between them in a way that felt intentional, not forced. "It was never just a contract," he said, the words coming slower, but clearer. "I was the one who treated it like one." And for the first time, Lily's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to show that his words reached her, even if she did not respond right away. The quiet stretched again, but it was different now, not heavy, not breaking, just waiting, and Ethan held her gaze as he spoke again. "I do not care who you were before this, or why you came into my life the way